Cold metal floors of Station Harmony echoed under Darius's worn boots as he pushed his cleaning cart through the empty corridors. It was 2 a.m., and most of the station's residents were fast asleep. This was his world, the quiet hours when nobody paid attention to the man with the mop and bucket. Darius had been working these night shifts for 3 years now. The pay wasn't much, but it was honest work, and it kept food on the table back home on Earth where his sister Keisha was raising her 2 kids alone. Every credit he sent back mattered. The diplomatic wing was always the cleanest part of the station, but also the loneliest. Fancy aliens in expensive clothes walked these halls during the day, making decisions that affected entire planets. But at night, it belonged to people like him, the invisible ones who kept everything running. As he rounded the corner near the waste processing area, something caught his eye. A small figure was slumped against the wall, looking like a crumpled piece of paper someone had thrown away. Darius slowed his cart and took a closer look. It was a Valdris woman, he could tell from the pale blue skin and the way her ears curved slightly upward. She wore the same gray jumpsuit that all the service staff wore, but hers looked like she'd been wearing it for days. Her breathing was shallow, and even from a distance, Darius could see she was exhausted. "Hey there," he called out softly, not wanting to startle her. "You all right?" The woman's eyes snapped open, wide and fearful. She tried to stand but swayed on her feet like a tree in a strong wind. "I'm sorry," she said in broken English, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just resting. I will move." Hold on, Darius said, parking his cart and walking over with his hands visible. "You don't look so good. When's the last time you ate something?" She looked confused by the question, like nobody had asked her that in a very long time. Yesterday morning, I think." Darius felt his heart sink. He knew what hunger looked like, had seen it in his own mirror during the lean months after his father died. Without thinking twice, he reached into his lunch bag and pulled out his dinner, a protein bar and a small container of soup his neighbor Mrs. Johnson had made. "Here," he said, offering them to her. "You need this more than I do." The Valdris woman stared at the food like it was made of gold. "But this is yours. I cannot take your meal." "Sure you can," Darius said with a gentle smile. "My mama always told me that food tastes better when it's shared. Besides, I had a big lunch." That was a lie, he'd skipped lunch to save money, but she didn't need to know that. "Why?" she asked, still not reaching for the food. "You do not know me. I am nobody important." Darius shook his head. "Nobody's a nobody. Everyone's important to someone, somewhere. What's your name?" "Kira," she said quietly. "Nice to meet you, Kira. I'm Darius. I'm the guy who makes sure this place doesn't fall apart from dirt and dust." He held out the food again. "Please. It would make me feel better knowing you had something to eat." This time she took it, her hands shaking slightly. As she opened the protein bar, Darius could see tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I have not met many humans like you." "Like what?" "Kind ones." That made Darius pause. He'd heard stories about how some humans treated the alien workers on the station, not cruel exactly, but cold. Like they were machines instead of living beings with feelings and families. "Well, you've met one now," he said. "And if you're ever around during the night shift and need someone to talk to, I'm usually cleaning somewhere around here. Gets pretty quiet, and I could use the company." Kira nodded, taking small bites of the protein bar like she wanted to make it last forever. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sound being the gentle hum of the station's life support systems. "I should let you get back to work," she said finally, starting to stand. "You sure you're okay? I could call medical if you need." "No," she said quickly, fear flashing in her eyes again. "No medical. I am fine now. Thank you, Darius." She disappeared down a service corridor before he could say anything else, leaving Darius standing there with his cart, wondering what kind of trouble she might be in that made her so afraid of getting help. He shrugged and got back to work, not knowing that this simple act of kindness had just changed the course of human history. Part 2, Small Kindnesses ***. The next night, Darius found himself looking around every corner, hoping to see that familiar blue figure again. He packed an extra sandwich in his lunch bag, just in case. When midnight rolled around and there was no sign of Kira, he left half his dinner in the maintenance alcove where they'd first met, along with a small note written on a napkin, "In case you get hungry, D." By morning, both the food and note were gone. This became their routine over the next few weeks. Darius would leave small portions of his meals in different hiding spots around the service areas, and somehow Kira always found them. Sometimes he'd catch a glimpse of her disappearing around a corner, but she seemed too nervous to approach him directly. It was on a Thursday night, almost 3 weeks later, that she finally appeared while he was mopping the observation deck. The huge windows showed the beautiful star field beyond, but Darius was focused on getting the floors spotless before the morning shift arrived. "You have been leaving food for me," came a soft voice behind him. Darius turned around and smiled. Kira looked better than before, not as thin, not as tired. Her grey uniform was cleaner too. "Figured you might need it," he said, wringing out his mop. "How you been doing?" "Better, thanks to you." She hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer. "May I ask why you do this? Most humans here, they do not see workers like me." Darius leaned against his mop handle, thinking about how to explain it. "Back home, my grandmother used to run a small diner. She always said the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching, but what they do when nobody's looking. She used to feed anyone who came to her door, didn't matter if they could pay or not." "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was. Raised me and my sister after our parents died. Taught us that everyone deserves basic kindness, no matter where they come from or what they look like." He gestured to the stars outside. "Seems like that lesson's even more important out here, with all different kinds of people living together." Kira nodded slowly. "Tell me more about your family." So Darius did. He told her about his sister Keisha, who worked 2 jobs to support her kids. About his nephew Jaden, who was 8 and wanted to be an astronaut when he grew up. About his grandmother's diner, and how she used to let him help flip pancakes on Sunday mornings. "What about you?" Darius asked. "You got family somewhere?" A strange look crossed Kira's face. "Yes, but they are far away. Very far away. Must be tough, being so far from home." "It is," she said quietly. "But meeting you has made it easier." As the weeks passed, their late-night conversations became the highlight of Darius's shift. Kira's English improved rapidly, and she asked endless questions about Earth, about human culture, about his life. Some of her questions seemed oddly sophisticated for someone in a service job, but Darius figured she was just naturally curious. "Why do humans value hard work so much?" she asked one night as they shared his thermos of coffee. "I guess because it's honest. My dad used to say there's dignity in any job that helps people, whether you're running a company or cleaning floors. Both matter. Even cleaning floors. Especially cleaning floors. You think all those fancy diplomats could do their important talking in dirty rooms? Everything's connected, Kira. We all depend on each other." She seemed to find this fascinating. "And you truly believe all work has equal value?" "Well, maybe not equal pay," Darius laughed. "But equal respect? Absolutely. The lady who cleans the hospital operating rooms is just as important as the surgeon, in my book. Maybe more important, because if she doesn't do her job right, people die." Kira was quiet for a long moment. "I have never heard a human speak this way before." "Maybe you've been talking to the wrong humans." One night, she asked him about his dreams. Darius felt a little embarrassed talking about them, but there was something about Kira that made him want to be honest. "I'd like to start my own cleaning company someday. Not just janitor work, but real restoration, helping people clean up after fires, floods, that kind of thing. Bringing something back to life that looked hopeless." He shrugged. "Probably sounds silly to someone who works around all these important diplomatic people." "It does not sound silly at all," Kira said seriously. "It sounds like you want to help people when they need it most. That is very noble." "Noble?" Darius laughed. "Just practical. World's always going to need people who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty." What he didn't notice was the way Kira studied his face when he talked, like she was memorizing every word. Or how sometimes she would ask questions that seemed to test his character, pushing to see if his kindness had limits. All Darius knew was that these conversations with a lonely alien worker were becoming the best part of his day, and he looked forward to them more than he'd looked forward to anything in years. He had no idea he was being evaluated by one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Part 3, The Truth Unveiled ***. Everything changed on a Monday morning when Darius arrived for his shift to find the entire station buzzing with nervous energy. Security guards were posted at every major corridor, and the usual quiet hum of daily life had been replaced by urgent whispers and hurried footsteps. "What's going on?" Darius asked Jerry, one of the day-shift maintenance workers who was just finishing up. "Big trouble with the Valdris Empire," Jerry said, shaking his head. "Something about trade disputes and territorial rights." The human ambassadors are freaking out because apparently their queen is coming here personally to settle things. Darius felt a chill run down his spine. Their queen? Yeah, first time she's ever left her home system. Word is, if these talks go bad, we could be looking at a real conflict. Maybe even war. As Jerry left, Darius stood there processing this information. War. The word felt heavy in his mind. He thought about his sister Keisha and her kids back on Earth, about all the innocent people who would suffer if things went wrong. Over the next 3 days, the tension on the station grew thicker than fog. Darius noticed that many of the Valdris workers had disappeared, probably sent away for security reasons. His heart sank when he realized that included Kira. For 3 nights, he'd left food in their usual spots, but nothing was touched. Their late-night conversations, which had become so precious to him, were gone. He found himself worrying about her more than he expected. Was she safe? Had she been sent back to Valdris space? The thought of never seeing his quiet, thoughtful friend again made him feel lonelier than he had in years. On Thursday morning, the announcement came over the station-wide communication system. All personnel are required to attend the diplomatic assembly at 1,400 hours. This is not optional. Darius had never been to one of these big meetings before. As a janitor, he usually stayed invisible, working around the important people rather than with them. But today, everyone was required to be there. The main assembly hall was massive, with seating for over 1,000 people. Darius found himself squeezed into the back with the other service staff, watching as diplomats, trade representatives, and military officers filled the better seats down front. Ambassador Rodriguez, the head of the human delegation, stood at the podium looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to host these crucial negotiations. The Valdris Empire has sent their finest representatives to. Actually, came a clear, strong voice from the back of the hall. The Valdris Empire has sent its ruler. Every head in the room turned toward the main entrance. A procession of Valdris officials was walking in, wearing elaborate robes in deep purple and gold. But Darius wasn't looking at them. His eyes were fixed on the figure leading the group. It was Kira. But it wasn't Kira. This woman moved with absolute authority, her head held high, her shoulders straight. She wore robes that probably cost more than Darius made in a year, and a crown of crystalline material that caught the light like captured starfire. Every Valdris in the procession followed her lead, and even the human diplomats were standing up in respect. Darius felt the world tilt sideways. His lunch bag slipped from his numb fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. Your Majesty, Ambassador Rodriguez stammered, we were told your representatives would be handling these negotiations. I have been handling them, the woman who had been Kira said, her voice carrying easily across the silent hall. For the past 6 weeks, I have been living among you, observing, learning about humanity from the ground up. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Darius heard someone behind him whisper, she was here the whole time? Some of you, the queen continued, and her eyes seemed to scan the crowd, treated my people with respect and kindness. Others. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Others showed their true nature when they believed no one important was watching. Ambassador Rodriguez looked like he was about to faint. Your Majesty, if we had known. Exactly, the queen said, and there was steel in her voice now. If you had known. But character, Ambassador Rodriguez, is not about how you act when you know you're being judged. Character is about how you treat people when you think it doesn't matter. Darius couldn't breathe. Every conversation they'd had, every shared meal, every question she'd asked about his family and his dreams, it had all been a test. The lonely alien worker he'd befriended was actually the most powerful person in an empire spanning dozens of star systems. He felt stupid. Betrayed. Used. Had any of it been real, or was he just some lab rat in her experiment? During my time here, the Queen was saying, I encountered hundreds of your people. Most barely acknowledged my existence. Some were actively dismissive or cruel, treating me like a piece of furniture to be worked around. She stepped forward, closer to the crowd. But there were exceptions. A few individuals who showed me that humanity might actually be worthy of the alliance we came here to discuss. Darius wanted to run, to disappear, to be anywhere but in that room. But his feet felt like they were glued to the floor. These negotiations will continue, the Queen announced. But they will not continue as originally planned. I have learned things about humanity that will change how we proceed. She looked directly at the back of the room, her eyes finding Darius in the crowd of service workers. And I believe some of you have questions that deserve answers. Part 4, the judgment ***. The assembly hall cleared out slowly, with people whispering and casting nervous glances at the Valdris queen. Darius tried to leave with the crowd, hoping to disappear back into his invisible world of mop buckets and cleaning supplies. But a gentle hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Darius," came that familiar voice, though it sounded different now, more formal, more distant. "Please stay." He turned around to face her, this woman he thought he knew. Up close, the transformation was even more jarring. The tired, hungry worker was gone, replaced by someone who radiated power and authority. But her eyes, those were the same eyes that had looked at him with gratitude when he'd shared his protein bar. "I suppose you have questions," she said. Darius found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. Was any of it real? The question hung in the air between them. Around the nearly empty hall, a few human diplomats lingered nervously, clearly wanting to approach but not daring to interrupt. "The hunger was real," she said quietly. "I had not eaten in 2 days when you found me. My security detail thought complete authenticity was necessary for the deception to work." "So you were actually starving?" Darius felt a mix of anger and confusion. "Your own people let you starve for some kind of test." "It was my choice. I needed to understand what it truly meant to be powerless in your society." She gestured to the empty hall around them. "From up there, in the diplomatic chambers, everything looks different. But down in the service corridors, with nothing but a grey uniform and a mop bucket for company, that's where you see who people really are." Ambassador Rodriguez finally worked up the courage to approach them. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should conduct this conversation in a more appropriate setting." "This is exactly the appropriate setting," the Queen said without taking her eyes off Darius. "For 6 weeks, this man treated me like an equal when he thought I was nobody. He shared his food, his stories, his dreams. He asked about my well-being and listened to my answers. How many of your diplomatic staff can say the same about any of my people?" The ambassador's face went pale. Darius could see him trying to remember if he'd ever even acknowledged the existence of the Valdris service workers. "Your Majesty," Rodriguez stammered, "if there have been any diplomatic oversights." "Oversights?" The Queen's voice grew sharp. "I watched your people walk past my disguised guards as if they were invisible. I saw human staff members dump extra work on Valdris employees without a word of thanks. I witnessed casual cruelty disguised as efficiency." She turned back to Darius. "But not from you. Never from you. Do you know what you told me when I asked why you shared your food with a stranger?" Darius felt heat rise in his cheeks as he remembered that first night. "I said everyone deserves basic kindness." "Everyone deserves basic kindness," she repeated, letting the words echo in the large space. "Not everyone deserves it if they're important, or if they can do something for you in return. Everyone. Period." "Look, I didn't do anything special," Darius said, feeling uncomfortable under the intense stares of the remaining diplomats. "I just treated you like a person. Isn't that what anyone would do?" "That," the Queen said, "is exactly my point. It should be what anyone would do. But in 6 weeks of testing, you were one of only 3 humans who consistently showed genuine kindness to those they believed were beneath them." Ambassador Rodriguez looked sick. "Your Majesty, surely we can work past any cultural misunderstandings." "This isn't about cultural misunderstandings, Ambassador. This is about character." The Queen walked over to one of the large windows overlooking the station's main plaza. "My empire spans 4 to 7 star systems. We've built alliances with dozens of species. But we've learned that technology and trade agreements mean nothing if they are built on a foundation of contempt." She turned back to face them. "The Valdris people value honor, respect, and genuine compassion. These are not negotiable points in any alliance we make." "Of course, Your Majesty. Humanity shares those same values." "Does it?" The Queen's gaze was steady and unforgiving. "Because from what I observed, humanity talks about equality while creating rigid hierarchies. You speak of dignity while treating your service workers like furniture. You preach compassion while ignoring suffering that happens right in front of you." Darius felt like he was watching a train wreck in slow motion. Everything the human delegation had worked toward was crumbling because people couldn't be bothered to say please and thank you to the cleaning staff. "But," the Queen continued, and something in her tone shifted, "I also learned that there are humans capable of genuine goodness. People who show kindness not because it benefits them, but because it's the right thing to do." She looked directly at Darius again. "People who understand that how you treat those who can do nothing for you reveals everything about who you really are." "Your Majesty," Ambassador Rodriguez tried again. What would it take to move forward with these negotiations? The Queen smiled, but it wasn't entirely friendly. That depends entirely on whether humanity is willing to learn from its mistakes. And whether you're willing to listen to those who actually understand what it means to treat all people with dignity. Her eyes never left Darius's face as she spoke, and he began to get a sinking feeling about where this conversation was headed. Part 5, The New Order The Valdris Empire will move forward with the alliance, the Queen announced, and Darius could practically feel the relief flowing from Ambassador Rodriguez like a physical force. We will share our advanced technology, open our trade routes, and provide the military support you've requested against the Korath raiders. Rodriguez's face lit up like Christmas morning. Your Majesty, this is wonderful news. We're prepared to sign whatever agreements. But, the Queen continued, holding up a hand that stopped the ambassador mid-sentence, there will be conditions. Non-negotiable conditions. The smile faded from Rodriguez's face faster than air leaving a punctured balloon. Of course, Your Majesty. What did you have in mind? The Queen walked over to where Darius stood, still trying to process everything that was happening. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the flecks of silver in her dark eyes. Darius Washington will serve as the primary human liaison for all future negotiations between our peoples. The silence that followed was so complete that Darius could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Ambassador Rodriguez's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. I'm sorry, Rodriguez finally managed. Did you say the janitor? I said Darius Washington, the Queen replied, her voice carrying a warning edge. A man who understands the value of every person, regardless of their position. Someone who has already proven he can be trusted with the most important diplomatic mission of all, treating others with basic human decency. Your Majesty, with all due respect, Rodriguez said, sweat beading on his forehead, Mr. Washington has no diplomatic training, no education in interstellar law, no experience with. He has something far more valuable than training, the Queen interrupted. He has integrity. Can you say the same about your current diplomatic staff? Darius found his voice, though it cracked slightly. Hold on. I can't. I mean, I'm just a guy who cleans floors. I don't know anything about running negotiations or trade agreements or... You know about fairness, the Queen said gently. You know about treating people with respect. You know about doing what's right even when no one's watching. Those are the only qualifications that matter for the kind of partnership we want to build. Rodriguez was shaking his head frantically. Your Majesty, the United Earth Council will never approve this. There are protocols, procedures, chains of command. Then perhaps the United Earth Council needs to reconsider its priorities. The Queen's tone was final. This is not a request, Ambassador. This is the condition for our alliance. Take it or leave it. The next few hours passed in a blur for Darius. There were frantic calls to Earth, emergency meetings with station commanders, and heated arguments in languages he didn't understand. Through it all, he sat in a conference room that probably cost more than his entire apartment, wondering how his life had gotten so completely turned upside down. Finally, late that evening, Ambassador Rodriguez returned with news from Earth. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one day. The Council has agreed to your terms, Your Majesty, he said, his voice flat with defeat. Mr. Washington will be given full diplomatic status and authority to negotiate on behalf of humanity. Excellent, the Queen said. She turned to Darius, who was still sitting in stunned silence. I believe congratulations are in order, Ambassador Washington. Ambassador, Darius repeated numbly. This morning I was worried about running out of floor cleaner. 6 months later, Darius sat in his new office overlooking the station's central plaza, watching children from a dozen different species playing together in the recreation area below. Human kids chased Valdris youngsters in a game of tag, while Korath children, former enemies who were now allies thanks to the three-way peace treaty he'd helped negotiate, built elaborate structures out of energy blocks. The door chimed, and the Queen, who had insisted he still call her Kira during their private meetings, entered with 2 cups of that terrible station coffee they both somehow still preferred. Any regrets? She asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Darius gestured to the stack of trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and peace treaties covering his desk. Some days I miss how simple things used to be. Sweep the floor, empty the trash, go home. Now I've got 17 different species wanting to negotiate mining rights in the Outer Rim. But? Kira prompted with a smile. But, Darius said, looking out at the playing children again. I guess keeping the peace isn't so different from keeping things clean. You just have to pay attention to what needs doing and treat everyone with respect. Your grandmother would be proud, Kira said. Yeah, Darius replied, thinking of the woman who'd raised him to believe that every person mattered. I think she would be. A communication alert beeped on his desk, another crisis somewhere that needed the human ambassador's attention. Darius sighed and reached for it, but he was smiling. After all, someone had to keep things clean, and apparently the universe had decided that someone was him. Ambassador Washington, came the voice from the comm unit, we have a situation developing in the Centauri sector. Darius picked up the call, ready to do what he'd always done, help people solve their problems and make sure everyone was treated fairly. Some things, he'd learned, never really changed.